let's start with esports. So you were a professional esport player at the age of 14.
Yes, right. So, I mean, I was very much into everything related to computer, PC technology by the time already. And I built websites during when I was in school, but also played professionally. And the fun fact here is that I had to lie about my age because most of the tournaments were only allowing people from the age of 16. And therefore, I was 14 at the peak of my whole esports career, but
Mhm.
yeah, I had to frame it a little bit differently.
What were you playing?
Several games like Counter Strike, of course, Team Fortress Classic,
Classic.
but in terms of the leagues, I was playing Jedi Knight 2. So I'm also a big Star Wars fan. And the crazy thing is, I never thought about it that they already started to build up a team by the time. So I built up like an own squad within Pro Gaming, which was like a very reputable clan back in the time.
Yeah.
And I started to acquire team members and build out my own team. And then in the end, we were playing at Clan Base and Esports League ESL, and we have been undefeated the whole time. We only had two draw results, and then nobody wanted to play against us anymore. And that's where we said, okay, we're stopping now. We are leaving this game, and we have achieved everything we can achieve, basically.
That's fun. Did you make money in esports? Like you get paid?
No, it was not yet the time with real contracts. I mean, in some cases, but not for all the games. So especially for Counter-Strike and World of Warcraft, etc., it was the case, but not for Jedi Knight 2. But I got a lot of stuff sponsored, like mouse pads, I don't know, even like a monitor. You know, back in the time, we had like
Yeah.
bigger, more expensive monitors, even sometimes like a graphics card. So there were some pretty nice little things which were really great for me as a student being in school, you know. So I didn't have like any cash in the pocket, and therefore it was amazing to get a graphics card which cost maybe like 300 euros. And
Yeah.
therefore it was really worth to do it for the fun, but also for this kind of sponsoring gifts.
Cool. Well, Carsten, we're really excited to have you here today. Today we're here with Carsten Hermann. He's co-founder and CTO of Particula. Particula is operating a platform for AI-enabled digital asset risk ratings and on-chain analytics. He's an entrepreneur for 16 years now and focused on several companies in the hardware and software space. So, Carsten, thanks so much for joining us. Really excited to have you today.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about your kind of esports background, pre, pre maybe like work, I guess maybe esports is work.
That's a really good point because from the moment I started my first business, I stopped playing computer games and did never resume it. It was really like first this and then on a professional level.
Yeah, tell us about what you did post gaming.
Post Particular, you mean?
Yeah.
So back in the time, you know, because I already did websites during school, start with web design and programming, and then I went to studies to Berlin in Germany, which was around end of 2007. And right in the next year, I started a professional web agency together with another student from the university, but also one of the lecturers. And this was really great because I was able already to get some money, some cash in the bank while being a student. And out of this whole web design part, so you can imagine, I started designing using like Photoshop and so on, this kind of tools, and programming websites using HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So there was no existing framework yet. Later on, you know, WordPress joined the whole game and it became so much easier to do websites. And I progressed then around 2000, end of 2009, into application development using .NET, C++, and also Flash, which was still a thing back then,
Yeah.
and did like active applications. And actually, I was really interested in large interaction devices, like huge touchscreens. Back then, I think the iPhone was even not released during this time. So we are now talking about around 2010. So I was building my own touch monitor, using like a projector, a mirror to increase the width of the whole image, using like an infrared camera at the projection surface. And in this way, I was able to detect when like the screen was touched and the camera was seeing it from underneath, and I could then calculate like the coordinates on the screen. And then I did this business. I mean, it was professionalized with LCD monitors, later with OLED screens. But I did this business for over 10 years and always sold to, yeah, mostly corporates like SAP, Nike, and so on, like large 90-inch, 100-inch interaction devices with interactive software. And you can even see some of them still in operation. For example, if you go to one of the Google stores in California or New York, there you can see those transparent displays with physical products behind. They are still made by my company, although it's already some years ago. And yeah, then, as I started with digital stuff, I did so much hardware, tangible stuff for quite some years, but I was really interested to get back into the digital space more and more. And when I discovered the whole blockchain space in 2017, it was clear for me that sooner or later I need to transition my whole career path towards blockchain.
Yeah. What caught your interest with crypto and blockchain?
To me, it felt a little bit like a new beginning, the same like when I discovered programming and web design. So it's like limitless, When I started to do my first website or the program, my first website, I understood, okay, I can do everything I want just using code. Anything I have in mind, I can bring it up to the screen. And it was the same with blockchain because it's this kind of completely new infrastructure where I can see it's basically like a blank page. And you, me, we are currently in a position that we are like painting the picture in front of us. It's not given yet. So we are really directing how this whole new, let's call it the new world, is developing. And when I understood this, it was like really fascinating. And I thought, damn, I cannot stick any longer to hardware manufacturing while something so big is coming up in the world and will basically reshape how any kind of financial transaction is happening.
Yeah. What do you see from a blockchain ecosystem perspective? How is it a bit different? Obviously, it's exciting come from your background. How do you see things a bit different as you kind of have gotten into it, kind of moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it was all very experimental. So it was more like for fun. And I think it took really lots of years for actors in the market, for people who used it to understand that this is not like a temporary new thing where I can just play around. This is really something where we're building out new fundamentals.
Yeah.
And therefore, seeing how the whole ecosystem is developing, it's crazy how big the shift is that happened in the past 2 years. So, in my understanding, it completely transitioned from pure gambling and consumer-driven use cases to really professional space with institutional players involved. And that's also the thing which I find really exciting every time I'm traveling to New York or to any kind of conference, to really see how much already happened and is happening under the hood. Because everything I read mainly in the media is about consumer-oriented developments, is about scams, hacks, and so on, or memes, whatever. But the first moment, which was almost like 2 years or 2.5 years ago, when I discovered like this new kind of payment rails that are building out, this new kind of interoperability, which is possible now, they really understood them, like the whole financial professional space is now changing. And that got me really excited.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Let's start diving into Particula a little bit. So why don't you give us kind of the high level of what you guys are working on?
Yeah, so with Particula, we are like a rating and analytics provider, but I want to emphasize that really the importance on the rating part. As a provider in the space, we do calculate, assess tokenized asset products, and the special thing here is that we do it in like a programmatic way. So we have developed a rating framework which is spanning over all three levels, on the issuer level, the token level, and the underlying asset level. This is already kind of a USP compared to other analytics companies in the space, but also our rating framework is made in a way that it's rule-based. We can execute it automatically within our platform. That means we are scalable with this part, and we can also adapt it in almost real time based on events that are happening on the market. And comparing this with the traditional rating industry, it's a completely different approach. So we are not having like a huge workforce of people who is looking at it in a manual way. So it means we are also eliminating this kind of human error factor by making it in a programmatic way. But also we adapt very quickly to how the whole ecosystem is changing. So therefore, also the previous question was quite interesting about the ecosystem development. As for example, we are now working on the update of our rating framework, and we can see that, for example, ecosystems are doing upgrades. You know, the mechanics are changing. Also, new token standards are coming out. Regulation is changing. And that means we are in a very dynamic space, which is constantly in movement. And with Particula, we are able to master this and therefore also adapt the rating score based on what's happening. Is a smart contract being updated, the regulation being updated, maybe also something in terms of the company setup in the background or the product structure was changed. And this is a completely new situation, when we compare to the traditional rating sector.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, what do you see the biggest use cases for kind of what you guys are doing? Or maybe stepping back, I mean, why is it important from a risk rating perspective for tokenized assets?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And actually, we have to dive a little bit deeper in order to understand it and make it more clear. So we have now like a traditional investment product. Might it be like a real estate property, a money market fund, a bond, whatever it is. And in the moment we bring this on the blockchain and we tokenize it, we are changing all major product features. So basically, valuation dynamics are changing. The whole regulatory framework around the product offering is being changing. The technical setup is changing. I mean, we are now having like a smart contract technical layer on top of the actual financial product in this case. But also the operational infrastructure is changing. And that's why we do also focus more and more on assessing the actual ecosystem where the product has been launched. And in addition to this kind of changing product specifications, it's also the case that the same underlying product is being tokenized and utilized by different actors in different ecosystems. For example, when you look at like the Biddle Fund from BlackRock. So the Biddle Fund in general is just like a traditional private fund, so a normal financial product. But now, due to the tokenization, it's being present or being utilized in 5 different token products by 5 different issuers, and it's active in over 6 different ecosystems. And this is like increasing the whole amount of dimensions where different kind of risks can evolve, because I can now buy the same underlying product in 5 different tokenized versions with 5 different product structures in 5 different jurisdictions in 6 different ecosystems by 5 different companies. And there you can see it becomes really complex. But why are we still seeing so much sense in this happening is that with this new technology, with blockchain and bringing those products onto the blockchain, we have on the one side this whole aspect about interoperability. So I can now utilize this underlying asset as a collateral to do something else with it in a DeFi protocol. I can have like instant settlement. I do not need to wait 2 or 3 days for transaction to settle. I can have it settled in 20 minutes. And I can also develop completely new products because I have a smart contract and I can program. I can put like a programmable structure into the product offering with automatic execution, different valuation, whatever. So you can see the flexibility is increasing. The access, of course, because of the fractionalization is increasing. And this is happening a lot already in real estate. And also this kind of interoperability is increasing. So we are working now borderless, basically. We're not tied anymore to only use it in a certain area. It's completely global. And I think this is like really a big advantage compared to the current, I would say in some cases, restricted, or to speak more in blockchain terms, permissioned systems and products we have in the traditional financial space.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's start with like the different ecosystem perspective, just so our audience like understands what we're talking about here. So this is like with these tokenized products. So we're tokenizing a treasury. You might put it on Ethereum, or you might put it on kind of like Solana, Cardano. Go down the list. Is that kind of what you mean with like the ecosystems?
Yes, correct. And there we can see big differences. So for like performance metrics, like the general transaction throughput, like the latency, like the block time and so on, but also in terms of like the resilience. So if you're talking about a layer 2 blockchain, it will always depend on the layer 1. So there's like a general dependency risk. On the other side, if you talk about a layer one blockchain like Ethereum, there can be problems coming up with network congestion or also like very high gas prices. So that means we have very high transaction costs because so many people use it. On the other side, I have a very broad audience. Why going to a blockchain, which might be very efficient in terms of costs and transaction speed, there might be very few actors active. So it's always a trade-off between, do I focus on a larger audience, more use cases? Do I focus on actual performance? Do I focus maybe on security and privacy, like with Canton Network? And this is a really interesting development we are seeing because it seems like there is no definitive decision yet, or maybe also not coming between permissioned and permissionless blockchains, because it depends so much on the use case. And now looking at Canton Network, because we're also like having a validator running within Canton and doing also like a rating project there, it's interesting to see that also Canton, as a very restricted and very privacy-focused network, has its very unique features, and it needs to be there. You know, for some use cases, this is very useful. Not everything's public. Looking more at like consumer-driven applications, it's highly beneficial that it's completely permissionless, it's open, it's accessible for everyone to participate. And in this way, we have definitely a multi-chain future. But while the complexity of those networks is increasing, we do definitely also increase our efforts to keep track on all of those developments and start to measure lots of metrics by ourselves.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And I guess the other kind of like, back to the basics question is kind of why are people tokenizing these assets?
Yeah, so for some of those reasons, definitely to increase also accessibility to it. So there's a very good example of a company, they're operating in El Salvador, and they are having now, I think, over 100 million in real estate being tokenized and already sold out. And because to the people in South America, it's very hard to invest into this kind of assets, and they make it easy. On the other side, also, it's much easier to transfer, for example, the ownership rights. For example, if I have tokenized gold, I can participate in the price appreciation of gold, but I don't have to carry it around by myself. I can just send it somewhere and redeem it in a different country. So this is one thing, but also this kind of programmability, where I can program like additional features into the offering, but also interoperability. What I mentioned earlier, because we can see that kind of use cases are increasing. Let's say with US Treasury notes. So far, of course, it was a very safe and traditional investment product. But now it can be used as a backing for a stablecoin to generate a yield while I am having in my pocket, and that's also the vision I see for the future. I'm having my normal cash, my digital cash in my pocket. I can buy my coffee with it. But if I'm not actively spending my money, it's generating a yield. And I think this is so interesting and will evolve so much more that in the end, I think we have in our pocket on our phone a wallet which consists of available cash, any kind of investment product, and so on and so on. And in the moment I'm paying something in a store, just the least performing investment will be sold in a fraction only, of course, to pay for the goods I'm buying in the store. So we are making basically, not only real world assets in general, financial assets in general, like investment assets, now able to carry around and spend exactly when we need it at a fraction. And this also with increased speed and less costs. So therefore, it's crazy how this is now all exploding. I mean, we can see it. The whole space of tokenized assets is exploding exactly because of those benefits.
Yeah. I guess on that framework of just maybe where people are tokenizing these days, obviously the US is opening up the market, doing the regulation changes. Where are you seeing different pockets of opportunity or trends, shall we say, of tokenizing assets in the world these days from your lens?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit to start maybe first with the a little bit negative aspect. It's a pity because within Europe, we had really, really good conditions with the whole MiCA framework.
Yeah.
And I also think like the different parts of the framework, for example, that you need to have like a pausing mechanism implemented in case of like any fraudulent activities. It's a really good framework, but actually the EU is quite restrictive and not many companies are coming here and start their business here. So that's first of all a pity, why I think the regulatory environment is quite good. Then, of course, we see in Switzerland, we have less rules, lots of assurances, but they're also mainly focused on the local market. It's not really this international aspect. Looking at Asia, Singapore and Hong Kong, I know it's always lots in the media And in general, it's being classified as a very crypto and tokenization friendly hub. But actually, we do not see much issuances there. So it's mainly all driven by the HSBC and there's some other bigger players, but it's not the case that it's really expanding fast. So what's the situation right now? The US is the subject to get like an active regulation in place, but all these big actors who are coming from the US, who are dominating the global financial markets, they do their tokenization just by using like different kind of jurisdictions, like the British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, and so on, in order to be able to already start being active in the market and attract or generate some traction. So this is one case where I think in terms of regions that North America will be the leader in the future once regulation is in place. Right now, and this was a little bit to my surprise, but it totally makes sense, that South America, especially El Salvador, is so favorable in terms of conditions for tokenization products that we see increased traction from issuers coming from there. It's El Salvador, it's also Mexico, and I think a bunch of other countries. But South America is really increasing their role, their standing in the whole tokenization market at the moment.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Talk to us about kind of the ratings. So, from a high level, what kind of problems do you guys really try to solve with these ratings?
Yeah, so it's really about transparency and trust. To say the very easy words, why transparency? Because many information are typically hidden or not accessible to a possible investor. On the one side, they're not able to get those information because of a lack of technical understanding, a lack of understanding of regulatory environments or product structures. So we do really explain those aspects within our rating report very much in detail. So we are also creating a mind map for the whole product structure, for the whole company setup. As you know, for really professional kind of assurances, you have different players involved, a different broker, tokenization company, a different custody provider, and so on. So we are making the connection, and especially on a technical level, we do really look very deep into security and performance aspects. And I think if you would do the same analysis by yourself as a possible investor, you need to spend almost 100 hours on it. So if you just start from scratch, and if you now imagine you're looking at possible 10 possible investments on the market, it's completely ridiculous how much time you would need to spend to really fully understand every detail, every aspect in detail. And this already starts with terms and conditions. It's who of you is really reading 100 pages of terms and conditions? I think no one. But actually, it's really important because all your investor rights are described there. So also dispute resolution, contingency plans, everything. So therefore, it's so hard to get the understanding of it. And that's where we bring in the transparency, A, about the information we can receive, but B, also the trust, because we do assess it, we benchmark it against our framework. We have also developed for different kind of possible options, also different kind of thresholds. So it's all completely standardized. And this way, you can also compare a tokenized asset from asset class A to asset class B, which would be otherwise completely impossible. But we do harmonize it, and due to this benchmark against one and the same framework, it becomes comparable. And therefore, it becomes much more easier to fair a decision for investment. And on the other side, and I think that's also new compared to the traditional industry, as we have this kind of evolvement in product structures and regulatory stuff and smart contracts, we do also monitor it. And therefore, for our customers, we do send notifications when an update is happening. Because if you're holding a token, you would never know about if the smart contract was changed, if the fee structure was changed, if the procedure to redeem the token was changed, if the ownership structure was changed. You will never know it. And that's where we shed light on it, monitor it, and make it very easy to digest for our clients.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, because thinking about hey, you got a Charles Schwab account over here, they'll email you updated prospectus, things like that. But there's maybe less of that in the crypto space, I guess. From the we talked about this on our last call, kind of the three really kind of key things, if I could summarize it for you, or if I could summarize it, the big things are really functionality, investor protection, and compliance. Is that kind of correct?
Yes, exactly. And this is good that you mention it, because this is also a underrated aspect, I would say, to bring in security aspects when we look at the smart contract, all of those functionalities, match it with terms and conditions and other kind of structure documents, and also with the regulatory requirements. So therefore, we can determine on the one side if the product is being executed really in the same way as described in the terms, but also if it matches the compliance aspects and is not like subject to a possible kind of market downturn or whatever, because the product might be not compliant and needs to be stopped and taken off the market. So that's all what we bring together, and based on this assign then the score.
Yeah. Going back to maybe one of the elements of the compliance from a risk perspective. I mean, people talk about smart contract risk. What are some interesting things that maybe they would learn from your risk rating that maybe are not apparent from a tokenization perspective?
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's really, really extensive. Maybe we can leave away like the whole topic about possible smart contract threats like exploits, because this is only based on best practice when it comes to designing the function and so on. What is really outstanding and what we see very often on the one side is like the use of oracles. For example, what kind of oracle? Is it centralized, decentralized? Do I use several oracles? Do I have like a freshness check for the data in place? Do I check the deviation between different price feeds?
On that note, Carsten, could you kind of talk just what is an oracle for those that are listening?
Yes, so an oracle, to make it maybe easy to understand, is basically an API I can query to get the most current price from the market. But behind this, the oracle itself, so the oracle provider is aggregating pricing data, sometimes also different data, but mainly it's about price from different sources, for example, from 10 different exchanges. And then they submit the most current price from the last trade to you. Or, for example, a proof of reserve oracle is monitoring the reserve asset, for example, gold. And in this way, it can be verified that A, when I'm minting a token, that A, I mint it and price it on the most current market price, and B, I cannot over mint and really only mint tokens that represent exactly the same amount of the underlying asset. And the oracle is hereby like a trustworthy third party. So in this way, it can be mitigated that any kind of minting process is being maybe manipulated by the issuer in case of any kind of bad actor scenario. So it's really this kind of independency and trust factor that comes into place.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Anything else you wanted to add on the risk? I cut you off after the oracle side.
Yeah, what's really remarkable also to mention and talk about are access controls, because we can see very different standards in the whole market. In the one case, it can be that the whole smart contract, all functionalities, for example, updating the Oracle address, but also updating the fees, the minting, the burn procedure, the pausing, and so on, is all controlled by only one wallet, which might be even not secured by a multi-signature approach. So therefore, you can see the risk is huge. And there we can see very different structures, and we are looking of course, as like the whole ownership structure in the company, who got which rights, but also which wallet or how is it separated. So how fine-grained is the whole access control. So we're telling it, or we are calling it role-based access control, because every role within the smart contract is operated by a different wallet. And in some cases, even by a different entity, especially when I have like a third-party tokenization provider or third-party brokerage provider, that it can even be that with the same smart contract, and this is when we want to say it in easy words, within the same product offering, we have several parties who participate. And we do analyze how are those roles are separated, but also how are they secured. And of course, the best approach is to use like a multi-signature approach, where I need, for example, 3 signatures out of 5 possible parties who are able to sign. And besides this, I mean, we're also looking at like the financial logic, like the pricing mechanism. And it's also really interesting to see how is it then working if I want to redeem it or transfer it. For example, is the smart contract enforcing KYC checks when doing a secondary market transfer? Is it at all enforcing KYC? It's also very important to be compliant. And there you can see it's like a rabbit hole. And that's why I think it's maybe even over 300 metrics right now, which we do assess, but the complexity is constantly rising. And we do this, that's maybe also important to mention. We have developed this framework and also further develop it based on real happenings on the market. So we can see what happened to Mantra, what did now happen with Tether, and so on and so on. There are many things that are happening in the market, and we do very much in detail look at it and see what can we learn from it. What is the best practice, and how can we, in the best way, ensure that the investor is being safeguarded when buying this kind of product?
Yeah. Makes sense. Do you distinguish between technical risk and business risk? Like, for example, obviously Oracle manipulation versus business risk, like an SPV going under, and do you weight that equally? I mean, from that perspective, I'm just curious.
Yes, yes, we do. And that's also why we look very specifically on the company who is behind this offering and how the company itself is structured. If they have any kind of disaster recovery plans, we also look at where do they store their data? How do they operate their business? How does their financial audit look like in the past year? So it really goes far beyond this technical perspective. I would say it's like on a technical, economical, and compliance level. And what you mean, I think, is especially interesting when we see how updates are being conducted in different jurisdictions, because we already had the case. I cannot tell you about in detail about which one it is, but we had the case that the jurisdiction where the issuer was sitting did update the regulatory framework, and therefore the company was not anymore able to operate in the same way and offer the same product. So they are now changing the jurisdiction. And that's what we are closely monitoring.
Very interesting. I'm just thinking maybe more future state here, but from your lens, in 5 years, do you see Particula being more of like a Moody's for digital assets or more like a Bloomberg terminal for token risk? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, so you're asking me about the rating versus analytics aspect, I guess, on the one side.
Right.
So we are clearly a rating provider. And also on the contrary side, we are partnering also with other analytics providers. I think this analytics part within our company and our platform is also a tool in order to conduct our ratings. So it's like databases, but also to establish this kind of monitoring aspect for clients who subscribe to a certain rating. So it's like an extra benefit, I would say. But also to the first part of your question, where do I see it in 5 years? I do really envision that we are like the leading rating provider in the digital asset space, because it's so different from credit risk in the traditional space. And if you look at like some assurances and news in the media, for example, from the Janus Henderson liquidity fund, we are already being named in the same sentence with S&P and Moody's. I mean, we do also have like a relation to them, of course. But the business we are conducting is completely different. The whole nature of the business is completely different than comparing it to the traditional finance sector. And therefore, I think there will be some more niche-oriented players also rise on the market, maybe focused on sustainability aspects or whatever. I mean, it's also development we have seen in the traditional rating space. But when it really comes to this like 360-degree assessment, there I can really see that we are like the top number one rating provider in the space, especially with those scalability aspects we're working on right now.
Who typically pays you guys to write these ratings? Is it the issuers, the platform that it's listed on?
Yeah, so it's two-sided. On the one side, and this is the same, it's equivalent to the traditional rating industry. It's the issuer of the product, and typically they come to us already pre-issuance. Because this gives them a chance. And that's also something I want to highlight, because we have a very cooperative approach. So we work together with the issuer. Our goal is that the best possible product is being launched on the market. It's not like, hey, here's our rating, take it or leave it. It's really this kind of, okay, we are seeing this kind of best practices, and we give them the chance to adjust as well. And this is happening in almost every case, I have to say. And so the token issuer comes to us pre-assurance and then uses the rating, especially the rating report, for their marketing to investors in their product launch. And especially the report saves them a lot of time, because everything is described in there much in detail. So everyone who's interested can fully understand it. On the other side, we have now increasingly partnerships with marketplaces and exchanges. So everything around the point of sale. That means that the rating is being, on the one side, integrated directly where the user can buy the token or trade the token, to have also a better understanding about the risks involved. And on the other side, we're also being utilized for the due diligence upfront. So therefore, also it happens that exchanges are paying us in order to conduct due diligence on a certain amount or certain kind of tokens.
Yeah, it's a good point. And then when are these folks like? When does it make most sense to engage you? Is it like, hey, like we're going to be building a we're looking to tokenize these treasuries. Do I talk to you now, or do I talk to you after we've already, raised $100 million?
Yeah, very good question. I think in the moment just before you would launch it on-chain is the right point, because in order for us to conduct this kind of assessment, we already need to have the smart contract in place. we already need to have like your underlying product structure, your entity structure, terms and conditions, etc. It all needs to be in place already. Otherwise, we do not have a good basis to assess it, and therefore you as a customer would lose a lot of possible points if you come to us much, much earlier. And therefore, right before you are able or you're willing to launch on-chain and everything is in place, then is the right point to approach us. And it's also possible because compared to the traditional rating industry, it doesn't take like 3 to 6 months for us to conduct the rating. We are more talking about 2 to 4 weeks. Of course, like I mentioned, we are doing this kind of management discussions with this cooperative approach. And depending on the current product structure, there might be something minor adjustments needed. But typically, this is all possible to manage within a time frame of 4 weeks.
That's really cool. Curious. I mean, I guess you mentioned your platform is AI enabled too. Just from that, I'm assuming you're going through many different data points, a lot of data. How do you prevent model overfitting or bias when using AI in an environment that changes so fast, like the crypto or digital asset space?
Yeah, also a very good question. And I mean, we did start from the very beginning, of course, that we don't blindly trust the result that's coming out of our AI models. So to shed some more light on it, we have in total 3 different models running because, every model has like a different kind of focus. We do like calculation based assessments, but also text-based assessments. Therefore, it's pretty different in terms of what the model has to process. And we built internally an AI review hub, which means we have like a bunch of research analysts in place, also like focused on issuer token or underlying level. And they do review every answer that's coming out of our AI models and give feedback. Like they either accept it, they edit it and give it back, or they completely reject it. And as we're doing it now for a couple of months already, we have been able to gather a lot of data sets about the quality and the results from our models. And in this way, we can train it further. Of course, no report will be released without this kind of human oversight. So, quality and especially this kind of data depth and richness is really, really important for us. And we know when you look at like the Janus Henderson Fund, for example, they have received like over 200 million allocation within the Spark allocation, and we know it's also like a really big that there's a really big importance on how we assess and what we are communicating to the outside world about the product, because basically we're judging about the product's future success as well. We are influencing it, and therefore we really put a big emphasis on very much carefully checking all of this output. Of course, it saves us a lot of time, but it's not yet in a state where we'd say, hey, here's all the data, now generate the report, and that's the result. So that's also to manage here the expectations. That's not the case. We are more likely looking at saving time for all of this kind of transaction analysis, historic analysis, also finding like patterns or checking like terms and conditions and fund structure prospectus and so on. So there is really where we can deeply benefit from it. And I think also when it comes now in the future to more and more different ecosystems which are performing in very different ways, we'll also be able at some point to evaluate at which moment in time it's good to use one ecosystem over the other based on the analysis of 100,000 different transactions. So things we would not be able to just do based on our human brain power.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Any surprising, you mentioned just obviously different aspects of what you can do with a few different models, taking that multi-model approach. Any surprising insight you've gained outside of a human analyst that you found out going through the process?
Yeah, I mean, especially within this anomaly detection, this is really interesting because there have been 2 or 3 very reputable tokens we have identified, which basically everyone knows in the tokenized asset market. And there we have some really big anomalies in place where you can see that, for example, 10 transactions are happening at exactly the same time with exactly the same gap between each other right after another, where we see, there's some kind of manipulation happening only to increase the amount of trading volume in order to rank higher in this kind of listings and rankings. And there we can see how people are using this kind of trading mechanisms in order to change the perception of their possible buyer audience. And this is a real big risk, I have to say, because every time I'm on a conference and talking about some of those tokens and assurances, I can see that it works. Their perception of the product is completely different from what I think about it, while looking deeper into what's happening on chain.
That's fascinating. Yeah, for sure.
And we're still very early with this whole AI stuff, I have to say. So there's so much more intelligence possible, but it all depends on data. And that's maybe also one interesting aspect to mention here, that the secondary market activity of tokenized assets, of course, is not so big yet when we compare it like to normal crypto tokens. And I think this will become really interesting once the market is growing more and more, because then we have much more data available and we are able to, make it more clear how we define like the baseline. What do we measure it against? When is it an anomaly, or what else is happening also within the fund flows through different wallets and so on. So therefore, I see this part of AI-based analytics so much more expanding, that we're definitely having lots of work to do the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. The more data you get, more history, the better it becomes, right? You brought up an interesting point about the secondary markets too. Where do you see that going from your point of view, analyzing a lot of data?
Yes. I mean, it's highly beneficial, if we have more tokenized asset products that have like a mainstream use case, like stable coins that are being backed by reward assets, for example. But for especially the large product issuances, when we have like 100 or 200 million bond issuance, this is typically the case that you have like the initial transaction and maybe one or two secondary market sales. But it's far away from having really like an active trading market. I mean, this is, of course, also due to the fact that it addresses institutional investors and not like retail customers. But definitely, I am 100% convinced that tokenized assets are very attractive, asset class product to invest in also for retail clients. It's only subject to the jurisdiction and like compliance aspects. But therefore, looking maybe 5 years in the future, I really see a very, very active secondary market for tokenized assets, maybe even comparable to crypto tokens, because for tokenized assets, also retail clients understand, hey, I'm buying actually a real value, a tangible value. It's not just like utility token or governance token. It's really something I would also buy if it's not tokenized. That's the thing. They're still investing into the same kind of product.
Right.
What are some of the most common, pitfalls or like gaps that you see, as you guys are evaluating these assets, from like a risk and compliance standpoint? Is there anything that like jumps out at you, like, hey, like we see this happening like pretty frequently? Anything like that?
Yeah, I think besides what I mentioned, like with the access controls, for example, I think one really big part where we still need some innovation coming in is proof of reserve, because the more we are tokenizing tangible in the physical world existing assets, the more we have the need to really prove that this token out of maybe 100 million tokens is really representing this particular share in a real estate, or this particular share in another kind of physical product, or even within a share within a fund or an SPV. And typically right now, this kind of connection from the token to the real world asset is stored off chain. So that's like really in terms of quality, some lack we are seeing in the market right now, but it's only due to the fact that currently there are very limited options to connect the token with the underlying asset in a way that is on chain. So right now it's all about just like off-chain registries. And I think if we can solve this, it would definitely also increase trust again. And it can really push the market more forward. Besides this, of course, one of the biggest insecurities we're seeing almost every time is like, how will the regulatory environment change maybe in the future? What will change? We have seen it now in Europe about stable coins, and there you can see some products have been taken off the market, therefore. And of course, this is a really critical point for some companies, especially if they are not like huge corporations who can afford to spend a couple €100,000 or dollars on this kind of legal stuff. And therefore, we can see some smaller players, they're a little bit hesitating because they're a little bit afraid of this kind of changes. This will basically disrupt their whole product structure, which they build up.
Yeah, that makes sense. Given your guys' detail, both quantitative and qualitative from a risk perspective, and kind of what you guys do across very many different metrics that you guys are looking at. I know, many people look at smart contract audits as a check the box end all be all.
Yeah.
I'm assuming maybe even the auditors that are doing these audits may find your process valuable. I'm curious, any insights that you've gleaned from independently going through and checking a smart contract from a risk perspective?
Yeah, of course, we do also consider within our assessments third-party smart contract audits by external auditors. And the quality is, of course, pretty good. Just the focus is different. So mostly they focus on security and performance. They also do like penetration tests and so on, but they do not really look at compliance aspects, and also do not look at like investor protection and how does it match with the terms and conditions, the rights enforcement, and so on. So therefore, in every assessment we are doing, and some of those tokens come to us with even 3 existing audits, we still find quite critical things because we are looking also outside of those security aspects. And I think there we can really bring a value add. So in lots of cases, the smart contract also gets upgraded after our assessment, and they build in additional features, which will help them actually to be compliant in the long term as well. And therefore, there's always a value add in place, but of course, it's a big help for us, a good indication if we have like an audit already coming up. And for our internal smart contract assessment, we have like specially trained research analysts. Of course, we also utilize AI in this manner to be more scalable. But yeah, as you can imagine, smart contracts are very individual, especially if we looked in at different ecosystems like Solana with a completely different development language, like compared to EVM blockchains. And therefore, there's still some fine tuning needed, also some manual assessment involved, and also some testing. So that's also something we are expanding more and more to develop this kind of testing automation in order to also simulate different use cases or different scenarios and how the smart contract is behaving in this case.
How frequently are reports updated? Like, is this something that needs to be updated, like based on like, hey, like this part, like something changed here, we need to update this, or is it just like annually, monthly? How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so on the one side, we do hand out our rating with a validity of 12 months, which is basically due to the fact that, yeah, the ecosystem, but also the product and the traction on the market and everything is changing so much and very dynamically. On the other side, we are performing, so we call it like a rating action. We do perform it every time a very significant action is happening. And this is very interesting when you look at like pre-issuance ratings, because the token issuer gets the rating from us, went out in the market, and maybe 1, 2, or 3 months later, he built up really good trading volume. You know, we got really price appreciation. So we see some very positive development. And this is then increasing the rating score. And therefore, it just happened now that 3 months after the initial rating, we are filing for this so-called rating action, and then also not only award a new score, but also update the whole documents. So in order for the issuer to utilize these documents also within their ongoing processes and monitoring. But that's mainly driven by market events or further developments in terms of like the smart contract, or even, like I mentioned, the change in the regulatory environment.
It makes sense. And then kind of last question for you as we're winding down. What advice, just kind of general advice, would you give to somebody that's looking to tokenize a product?
You mean from an investor or from an issuer perspective?
From an issuer perspective.
So from an issuer perspective, I would say look at the market and also assess like products that are being launched to the market, because in lots of cases we can see huge marketing campaign, really very well built out product, and so on, but no traction. Why? Because of the chosen ecosystem. I think this is really to assess, depending on what kind of product I want to launch, to really look deep and assess deeply for myself which ecosystem is the right one for me in terms of functionality, performance, but also in terms of the audience. This is a very big part, because if you have like an audience who's only looking like at meme coins, for example, it will be really hard to market this kind of product. So therefore, I think in my possession, ecosystems will evolve as different kind of hubs for different use cases, different kind of investment products, asset classes, what else people are looking for. And therefore, it's crucial that I'm not starting to sell fridges while I'm living in the Antarctic, for example, and not to sell sunscreen when I'm living maybe in a country with 1 daylight per year. So it's really important. And we see that some issuances did flop in some way. because they're present on the wrong ecosystem.
Yeah. And I'll flip that to you too, the investor side. Anything they should be looking for in particular?
So from an investor's perspective, I think due diligence is really hard. So it's really, really, really hard. And when I did it by myself, when I started to investing into crypto tokens back in 2017, or generally over the year, I lost a lot of money because I did buy products I did not really understand. They just looked really nice, they sound really fancy, and there's a big hype, a big buzz around it. So my first advice would be to never invest into a product you don't understand. And on the other side, I think it's also totally underrated to not only understand the product and the underlying asset maybe, but also the conditions. Because what we have seen so far, when there was like a huge loss in the market and many people lost their money, typically it would have been possible to avoid just by, for example, reading the terms. And it's so easy now. I can just copy paste it, put it into ChatGPT, will tell me the most important aspects for me as a retail investor, for example. And I think we are now in a state where every one of us lost some money investing into crypto, and it's really time to become like a professional investor, even though I'm just a consumer, just a retail client.
Awesome. Well, Carsten, this has been a lot of fun. Really appreciate you taking us down the rabbit hole here with a lot of these questions. So, thank you again for joining us. Where could people go to connect with you and learn more about Particula?
Yeah, so of course on LinkedIn, I'm posting twice per week about recent developments in the blockchain space. Today I posted just about quantum computing and how it will influence the blockchain space in the next couple of years when it comes to decryption, etc. So just reach out on LinkedIn. It's just Carsten Hermann. Then of course with Particula, we are very active on LinkedIn. And besides this, I want to recommend to everyone who is interested in tokenized assets to join our Telegram channel. And this is like personally by myself curated. Every day you can read about the most recent happenings in the tokenized asset markets. And you can just find it on Telegram under the handle Tokenized RWA.
Amazing. That's great. This has been great. And we appreciate your time and great conversation here. I'll make sure to include all your contact info in the show notes as well.